Hello everyone, today we are watching a movie that is based on a true story, called Bandit. A man named Gilbert is an expert in robbing banks. He has robbed a lot of banks before, and he is trying to rob one right now. He gets in a disguise and asks the woman behind the counter for the money. Gilbert is really calm and says that he is not going to hurt her. When he is out of the bank, he gets to a telephone booth and calls the police. He uses different voices to convince the police that they are trying to find a man with a red shirt. He gets out of the booth and blends in with people who go to a sermon reading. Some time later, he buys a car and drives away. A detective named Snides tries to catch Robert, but every time he tries, he is just a little too late. But how did we get here? 4 years ago, Gilbert was sentenced to prison for check fraud. Because it is a non-violent offense, he gets sent to a minimum security prison. Gilbert escapes and goes to Canada. He wants to start his life fresh and wants to do something legal from now on. Gilbert will try to sell ice creams, but the man who interviews him says that he needs an ID for that, and he doesn't have one. He pretends to go to his car to get the ID out of it, but secretly gets to a homeless man and buys the ID off him. From now on, Gilbert will live his life as a man named Robert Whiteman. Robert gets back to the ice cream place and signs up. Since he just started the job, he doesn't have any money to live in an apartment. He is trying to find a solution and finds a church-run hostel with free rooms. After 11 p.m., the doors are closed, but the woman who runs it, named Andrea, feels bad for him and lets him in. In the morning, he is trying to sell ice creams, but it doesn't pay that much. Some months go by, and his boss fires him because the company is downsizing. Robert is sad and goes to a club. The boss of the club, named Tommy, is a gangster and has the whole city in his pocket. His assistant, named Dave, catches Robert looking in their direction and asks if Robert got a problem with them. Robert de-escalates the situation and gets out of the bar. Detective Snides gets in and is trying to get Tommy in jail for his criminal activities, but he doesn't have enough evidence yet. In the evening, Robert gets to the hostel and sees Andrea again. He takes her on a date, and they are really bonding. 8 months later, Andrea and Robert live together. He is reading the newspaper and sees that the American police are still looking for him. Andrea is pregnant and wants to tell him, but he interrupts her before she can say it. Robert says that he needs to go out of town for work, but in reality, he is just going to hide for the cops. He travels to Vancouver and still needs money. He tries to find a job, but it doesn't go well. Robert gets a daydream about robbing the truck in front of him, but he doesn't really do it. Robert gets to a phone booth and calls Andrea. Andrea tells him that she is pregnant, and he is very happy to hear it. Because the legal way to earn money doesn't work for him, he will try to rob a bank. First, he gets a costume from a costume shop and goes to the bank. He pretends to work for a security company that checks if banks are safe. He is actually trying to get information about the bank so he can rob it later. After he gets the information, he gets to a class to learn how to make your own disguises. Normally this is for movies, but Robert will use it to not get his identity revealed when the guards look back at the security tape. It is time for him to rob his first bank, and he is very nervous. He gives a note to the woman behind the desk, but his penmanship is very bad, and she doesn't understand what the note says. He says that this is a robbery, and she gives him the money. Because he was so nervous, Robert forgot a bag. Lucky for him, there was one laying near them. The woman says that his nose looks weird. And his disguise is falling apart. After some time, he is ready to go back to his wife and gets on a plane. He meets her again, and they kiss. We see Snides helping a man whose house was just broken in when another detective named Hoffman asks if he wants to join forces and make a new team for catching the criminals. Then we see Robert and Andrea walking in a street. He says that he just bought a house, and they get in. She asks how he got the money, and Robert says that he has a job as a security analyst. After some time, he gets into the bar of Tommy again. Robert wants to become partners with Tommy, but Tommy thinks Robert is a cop. To prove that he is not a cop, Robert will rob the bank on the other side of the street. Robert gets in a toilet and comes out as a construction worker. They are waiting for him to get back out of the bank when they hear the door behind them. It is Robert, and Tommy is impressed. They become partners, and we see a montage of Robert robbing the banks. He puts almost all the money from the bank in a safe, and with the other money he buys a car. Tommy and Robert are becoming good friends, and Dave is scared Tommy will replace Robert for him. Robert has robbed over 50 banks, and Tommy asks why he doesn't go for the bigger amounts of cash, so he wouldn't have to do them so often. Tommy suggests that he could rob a jewelry store, and Robert thinks that is a good idea. In the meantime, we see the team that Snides and Hoffman put together. Snides says that they are trying to get evidence to put Tommy in jail. The detectives want to know everything about everyone from the gang so they can collect better evidence. They know Tommy and Dave and have some information about them, but there are still two people they want to know more about. The two guys are Robert and the disguised version of him. They don't know that they are the same person because Robert never took his disguise off when the detectives were near him. Sometime later, Robert gets home and sees Andrea with all the cash from the safe on the bed. She asks how he got all this money, and Robert comes clean. Surprisingly, she isn't mad, and she wants to see how he prepares for a robbery. They are in a car, and Robert says that they are looking for strengths and weaknesses of the bank. He gets out of the car and says that this is the time for him to rob the bank. He gets dressed in a suit and says to one of the security guards that his car is being towed. Robert gets into the bank and uses dry ice to get a lot of smoke in the building. The whole bank is full of smoke and the fire alarm goes off. The fire department gets there, and he pretends to be a fireman to get out of the bank with all the money. He gets in the car, and Andrea is amazed by the money and kisses him. When they are eating, she wants him to promise that he will stop with the bank robbing when they can retire. He says yes and asks her to marry him. Andrea says yes, and she is super happy. Back in the bar, Tommy and Robert are talking about a big job he is about to do on the jewelry store. Tommy says that he needs to bring a second man so the job can go smoothly. Robert assures him he doesn't need it, but Tommy wants him to take someone with him. Robert gets to the toilet and gets his disguise off his face because he still has it on from the last bank robbery. The detective gets in the bar and gets to the toilet too. He saw the disguised version of Robert going in, and the only one in the toilet right now is the real Robert. So now the detective knows that the last two people he had no information about are the same person. In the night, Snides gets a call that he needs to go to the police department. Dave is there and is still scared that Tommy will replace him for Robert. He says that Robert will try to rob a jewelry store the next day, and he wants the cops to catch him to secure his position in the gang. There are policemen near all the jewelry stores in town, but they can't see anything yet. Then Snides sees someone who is placing plants in front of one. In that same jewelry store, Robert is disabling all the cameras. He gets away with this because he is disguised as an electrician. When the cameras are disabled, he says to put the jewelry in the bag. When the job is done, the plants start to shoot out fireworks so the people outside can't see into the store. They get out of the back of the store and are now in a shopping mall. Snides is still on their trail and follows them. They get to a storage area and close the metal fence behind them. There is a door to the outside, but it is locked and they have to pick it. Snides gets there and points a gun at Robert. The second man continues with picking the lock, and they get away. He is in a phone booth again and is calling with Andrea. He says to pack her bags because they have enough money to retire and go to a sunny island. When he is home, the waters of Andrea break and they have to go to the hospital because she is about to give birth. After this, Robert has arranged a new home for them, but it is not on an island because the cops are watching all the airports. 2 years later, Robert is living his life and stopped with robbing banks because he has enough money now. One day, Tommy shows up. He asks if he misses the life of a criminal. Robert says that he likes it the way it is now, and Tommy responds and says that that is good because there will be a time when you do a wrong thing and end up in jail. Robert opens the vault and sees that he is almost out of money again, even though he robbed the jewelry store some years ago. He wants to do one last job, but Andrea doesn't think it is a good idea. In the morning, he gets out of the house and leaves a note that he will rob a bank in London. We see that Snides and his team know where he lives now and are inspecting the house. They are going to arrest him, but Robert went away to rob the bank. They figure this out too and are calling the airports and the train stations if they have seen a man named Robert Whiteman. Nobody heard something, but the detectives haven't checked a local airport yet. Robert is robbing the bank, and it was the bank from the first scene. But now we see that the story wasn't over yet. Robert gets to the airport to fly back to Canada, and we see that he is a wanted man. When the flight is over, Snides and his team are waiting for him, and they arrest him. In the interrogation room, Snides is asking him to rat out Tommy so he will get less jail time. Robert won't do it, so he will be put in jail for a long time. Thank you for watching the movie Bandit with us. If you liked it, subscribe.